What is the best way to use protein to build muscle? Obviously, there are tons of conflicting ideas out there about how much you should take, how important protein is, how much you can have per meal, and so on. In this video, we'll cover the 4 important aspects of protein so you don't ever have to watch another video on protein again. Now, first let's understand what protein is and what actually matters in it. At the very basis, protein is a major component in every cell in the body, has multiple functions throughout the body, and not all protein is the same. Some can help with transporting nutrients throughout the body, others help chemical reactions to happen faster, and other types help build the structure that make up living things. Despite the different functions it has in the body, all proteins have the same 21 building blocks called amino acids. These are what is responsible for the repair of muscle tissue. Not the protein itself, it's the amino acids in them that are important. If protein was a wall, amino acids would be the individual bricks making up for that wall. Each protein has non-essential amino acids and essential amino acids. The non-essential amino acids are the ones your body can't produce by itself and doesn't require from food. And on the other hand, essential amino acids are the ones your body cannot produce by itself and requires to get from food. You have about 9 essential amino acids: histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. These are very important for our body. Leucine, for example, is a very important amino acid for muscle growth, and tryptophan is a precursor for making the hormones melatonin, which helps you fall asleep better, and serotonin, which controls our mood, amongst other things. You may come across the terms complete protein and incomplete protein. A complete protein is one that contains all 9 essential amino acids. Examples of complete protein include beef, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy, soy, quinoa, and buckwheat. An incomplete protein is simply one that doesn't contain all essential amino acids. Now, this covers what protein actually is and what it is within protein that actually matters. Now, the thing with protein is that not all protein sources are made equal. Not all protein sources are the same, and not all protein sources will bring you the same amount of protein. For example, 50 grams of protein from this food will bring you more protein than 50 grams of protein from this food. If you need 100 grams of protein per day, you wouldn't meet your daily requirements if you ate 100 grams of protein from this food. Now, the question is, why do 50 grams of protein not equal 50 grams of protein, and why do not all food sources have the same amount of protein? For each protein source, we have something called the DIAS, or the Digestible Indispensable Amino Acid Score, which measures the digestibility of certain amino acids of proteins coming from certain foods. The DIAS accounts for amino acid digestibility at the end of the small intestine, providing a more accurate measure of the amount of amino acids absorbed by the body and the protein's contribution to the human amino acid requirements. To put it more simply, our body absorbs protein and amino acids better or worse depending on the type of food you eat. This measures the quality of a protein. That is why when we measure how much protein we need to consume on a daily basis, we cannot just measure the quantity of protein we eat, but we need to make sure the quality is good as well. According to the DIAS list, foods like whole milk, eggs, beef, whey protein isolate, or chicken breast all have a score above 107 and are seen as high quality proteins. On the other hand, foods like rye, barley, wheat, or almonds all have a score in the 40s, making them low quality proteins. Generally, vegetables have a lower protein digestibility, which is why getting the necessary requirements for protein is so hard on a vegan diet. Not only do you have a hard time getting enough protein with plant foods, but the protein is also not very digestible. We also need to account for essential amino acids. Foods that are higher on the DIAS list usually contain all or almost all essential amino acids, but because of the essential amino acids, these proteins are also better at being utilized in the body. Now, to get the necessary requirements of protein on a vegan diet, you could simply eat more plant protein, and that seems like a good option. In developed countries, we eat a bunch of protein in general because we have access to so much food. However, protein quality still matters. In a study looking at height in men in 105 countries, they found that in developing countries, height correlated with protein quantity, but in developed countries, protein quality mattered more for height than protein quantity did. You also need to consider the fact that if you need to eat more food to get the same amount of protein in, losing weight and getting less calories in will be very difficult. The show Game Changers made it feel like you could get your protein requirements from plant-based foods alone, when in reality there is a big difference in quality of protein between animal proteins and plant proteins. It is important that you consume different types of protein sources throughout the day, so you can 1. Have different levels of protein quality, but 2. Also get enough essential amino acids on a daily basis. If you really lack one of the 9 essential amino acids, the other ones can be utilized properly. Lastly, processing of plant foods reduces protein quality in them as well. For example, we don't just eat wheat, but we process that wheat into bread, and that processing worsens the protein quality. Plant proteins that by nature already have a lower protein digestibility score get an even lower score when they're getting processed. What is also interesting is that as you get older, you become more and more resistant to amino acids and protein, which means that the only way to counteract this regression is by consuming more and better quality proteins, most likely coming from animal food sources. Now, one last thing I'd like to clarify is that I'm not against plants at all, and I don't want to promote something like the carnivore diet. What I'm saying is that you have to be careful with the protein sources you consume. If you want to be on a vegan diet, that is perfectly fine. But if you want to meet your daily protein intake, you will have to supplement with soy protein or any form of plant protein. For example, on the DIAS list, soy protein concentrate is a very high quality protein source and could easily bring you the necessary essential amino acids and protein quantity you need. In any case, my advice would be to prioritize protein coming from real foods. So if you are vegetarian, try prioritizing milk and eggs as well, that are both very high on the DIAS list. And if you don't follow any strict dieting regime, try including animal protein sources in your diet. Now that we know that it's not only about protein but protein quality as well, how much protein do you actually need per day? The RDA, or recommended dietary allowance, is about 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight or 0.36 grams per pound of body weight. If you are a 150 pound or 68 kilo person, you would need about 54 grams of protein per day. That number is very easy to hit even on a vegan diet or with lower quality proteins. However, the problem is that this is the bare minimum to keep you from getting sick. This isn't the ideal amount of protein you could take in, especially if you begin training and being more active. In the sports nutrition research, it's clear that 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight or 0.36 grams per pound of body weight is not enough to support or maximize muscle growth, and there's lots of benefits by going above that. Now, the ideal amount of protein you could take in will depend on the phase you're in, which is why we'll cover all 3 of them. There's 3 main phases you can choose from: bulking, cutting, or a recomposition phase. Bulking is when you're trying to gain weight and thus are in a caloric surplus. Cutting is when you're trying to lose weight and thus be in a caloric deficit. And a recomposition phase is when you keep the same body weight but try to lose fat and build muscle at the same time. When you're bulking, your body is well fed and is much less likely to break down muscle tissue as a fuel source. You have many carbs and fats as a source of energy to burn first. They have this protein sparing effect. So during a bulking phase, you generally need less protein. The ideal amount ranges from 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight or 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. So if you are a 150 pound person, you would need approximately 105 to 150 grams of protein per day. When you're cutting, however, your body is not only getting less calories from food, you also have less body fat and glycogen stores which your body can use as energy or fuel. Because of that, your body is much more likely to break down muscle tissue as a source of calories. To avoid this as much as possible, it's ideal to increase your protein intake to 1.8 to 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight or 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. For a 150 pound person, that equates to 120 to 180 grams of protein per day. Now, if you're on the leaner side and training hard, going towards the upper end is better, and when you're still chubbier, going down the lower end is not a problem because of the stored energy you already have. Now, during a recomposition phase, when you're trying to build muscle and lose fat at the same time, the same recommendations as for cutting are applicable. And of course, there's more benefits at going towards the higher end if you're recomposition at a lower body fat level. Now, there is a specific rule when it comes to overweight people. If you weigh 300 pounds, you don't need 360 grams of protein per day on a cut. To measure this, we can take 1 gram of protein per centimeters. If you're 6 foot tall or 183 centimeters, you would need approximately 183 grams of protein per day. Now that we've covered how much protein you will need per day, how should you spread that protein throughout the day? There are 2 questions to answer this. The first is, how much protein can we absorb per meal? And the second is, how much protein can we utilize per meal? First of all, how much protein can we absorb in a single meal? The answer to that is all of it. We can absorb all the protein we eat in a single meal up to really high amounts. Absorption is simply the passage of nutrients into the bloodstream. However, we can't utilize all the protein we eat in a single meal to build muscle. Some research says that 20 to 25 grams of protein is all we can use in one sitting, but that seems very unlikely because of the countless people that eat once a day and are pretty damn jacked. Look at any influencer that is doing intermittent fasting or one meal a day. If all you could utilize was 25 grams of protein in a single meal, OMAD people would be very skinny and frail. A later study suggested that you could get more benefits from eating 40 grams of protein over 20 grams, and another showed better results from eating 70 grams over 35 grams of protein. So the answer to how much can we utilize per meal isn't very clear, but in any case, how much protein you eat per day is much more important than how much protein you eat per meal. If, for example, you need 200 grams of protein per day and eat 4 meals a day, you don't need to have exactly 50 grams of protein per meal. You could have 70 in one meal, 20 in the other, 100 in the third, and so on. As long as you get on average 200 grams of protein per day, you will be good. Now, the question of how many meals should we consume per day still lies around 3 to 5 meals per day to be more optimal and maximize muscle protein synthesis, or MPS. This is a process where amino acids are incorporated into bound skeletal muscle proteins. In simple terms, muscle protein synthesis is when your body builds muscles and you activate that process by eating protein. Our levels of muscle protein peak when we eat protein and start to decline after. The goal is to keep those levels high throughout the day, and we keep those levels by consuming protein frequently enough. That is why 3 to 5 meals is seen as optimal. Anything below or above that becomes less and less useful if your goal is to maximize muscle mass. Now, when it comes to meal timing and protein timing, there's a few questions we can answer. 1. How much time do I need between each meal? 2. Do I need protein after a workout? And 3. Is consuming protein before bed useful? The first answer is to keep 3 to 4 hours of time between each protein or meal intake. That way you keep muscle protein synthesis high and you have the ability to have 3 to 5 meals in a day. The second question is whether you need to consume protein after a workout, or in other words, is there a specific window of time where you can consume protein, otherwise you'll lose all the gains you've made from that session? The answer is that there isn't such a thing as an anabolic window, and as long as your pre-workout meal and post-workout meal are less than 4 to 6 hours apart, you'll be maximizing muscle growth. The only scenario where eating right after a workout is useful is when you train faster. In that case, eating protein after a workout is useful and necessary. The third question is whether consuming protein before bed is useful or not. It turns out that about 40 grams of protein a couple hours before bed can help with overnight muscle protein synthesis. Now, in the end, it is still more important to have enough protein throughout the day rather than the specific timings of it, but it can still help as a small boost. So here's what you should keep in mind when it comes to protein and protein intake. At the very minimum, try to get 0.7 to 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight, and if you're cutting, increase that amount by a little bit to 1 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. If you're overweight, calculate your protein intake based on your height by taking 1 gram of protein per centimeter of height. Don't worry too much about protein quality, but still try to get protein from multiple sources so you get enough essential amino acids. Try eating 3 to 5 meals per day with a relatively similar amount of protein per meal, although that is less important than consuming enough protein in the day. And when it comes to meal timing, just think about separating them enough and keeping 3 to 4 hours between each meal. So, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you learned something. There is a link in the description that will take you towards a product that I'm currently building. It isn't built yet, but if you put your email address, you will get 50% off once it launches. Check that out if you want. You don't have to. Peace.